Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeffrey from Parker Dewey. I am thrilled, doesn't even capture it. Beyond thrilled to be joined by Jade in this quarter's State of Campus Recruiting call. I have been a fanboy of Jade for probably years. Um, what she's been doing on behalf of students in particular, helping them sort of be a resource for them as they're thinking about career exploration and getting a job. And then on the flip side, what she's been doing with employers, really helping translate that voice of the student to the employers to help them recruit college students and recent grads more effectively has been incredible. So I was a complete fanboy for years. Had the pleasure of meeting Jade finally in 3D at NACE this year, and then asked her to join to really give that student perspective, what she's hearing from them, and also what she's hearing on the employer side. So thanks so much for joining, Jade.
Yes, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to give a quick sort of 2 minutes of background beyond what I shared?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. My name is Jade Walters. I'm a graduate of Howard University with a Bachelor of Science in Maternal and Child Health. I currently reside in Chicago. I relocated here over 3 years ago for my first post-grad role as a client solutions planner at TikTok on their CPG food and beverage advertising vertical. And around that time, I created my early career resources blog, the ninth semester, where I share tips, tricks, and resources for a community of over 130,000 Gen Z professionals. The work that I've done with the ninth semester has allowed me to not only help students navigate their early career journeys, but now in my current full-time role as an employer branding specialist at Yellow, I'm able to work with those employers to connect them with the students. And for me, my role as an employer branding specialist, I'm working with our employers to develop and execute employer branding strategies to attract and engage Gen Z candidates.
Wow. It's again, there's such a huge need there, and the fact that you have this view on both sides. I guess one of the things we're hearing a lot from employers is they're doing a ton of campus recruiting and they're focused on how do we get more interest and more applicants and assess skills. And we're going to dive into that. But let's start with the students. I mean, when students are going through this process, I mean, obviously they ultimately want to land a summer internship or a job, but what are they trying to get out of the process itself?
Mhm. So breaking up into two categories. So the underclassmen, freshmen, and sophomores, for them, their biggest goal is one, to figure out what exactly that they want to do, as well as exploring the different options that are out there. Like I know every year, at least twice a year at campuses, they have campus fairs and they have all these employers come in and they're talking about their programs, and underclassmen, like they want to get involved into these internships. So this is kind of where they first start, where they're looking to see like what's out there, because over the past few years of the pandemic, we've seen the increase of getting an insight into what life is like at these companies. Like there's a lot of day in a life videos, there's a lot of new career creators who are talking about their time, and it's piquing the students' interest earlier and earlier. Like I have high schoolers in my community who are reaching out to me looking for internships. So they're really starting as early as possible. And when it comes to the upperclassmen, so the juniors and the seniors, right now, a lot of them, they're really focused on, landing that internship that can eventually lead to a full-time role. Like they're starting earlier with wanting to make sure like when they graduate that they have a full-time position, that they're set, because we've seen it, especially with the pandemic grads, the 2021s, and then some of the 2020 grads, and then some of the 2021 ones going into the job market. It's a mess. Everything's virtual. We're coming out of the pandemic. So these students, like, they're like, we need to start earlier and earlier with our job hunt. So it's a mixture of getting exposure to different programs as well as setting up their careers as early as possible.
There's so much in there. So on the underclassmen, because let's separate this out as you were doing the underclassmen versus the juniors and seniors. The underclassmen are hungry to learn. Do they feel that what the employers are providing them is enough to really learn about the companies? Again, whether it's the videos or day in the life or info sessions, like what are they saying? Like we want to explore Are they giving you feedback? Do you feel like they're able to? That
Mhm.
question makes sense?
Yeah, I think, and first thing that comes to mind are those early ID programs. Like, I love that there's been an increase of them, whether it's a program that's a few weeks long or one that's 3 days long. I love the ones where, like, they take the students to wherever their headquarters is, like if they have one in New York and LA, and really immerse them into the environment. And from there, they're able to get mentorship, they're able to get professional development, because unless they're in business school or in the school of business, a lot of these students in their majors, they're not getting that professionalism, those classes or that education at school. So these programs are really the best ways for them to learn how to work on my resume, how to speak to professionals. So I've been getting a lot of feedback from students who are especially loving the mentorship aspect. Like, they have a professional mentor at a company who's able to, like, provide that knowledge about professionalism in corporate America in a one-to-one way. Like, that's what they're seeking, especially those students who they graduated and maybe their first 2 years they were still online before they're able to go on campus. They're looking for those in-person connections. And yes, they're going to get that in their campus with their peers and the professors, but they also want to get that professionally. So I've got a lot of feedback on those. They love the mentorship. And even sometimes too, what I've loved with these programs is that it kind of serves as a pipeline for their internship program. So it's like the students do the program, they love the program, they stay in contact. A year or two later, those recruiters come back and are like, hey, like, you're now eligible for our internship programs. We would love for you to check it out. And for them, it makes them feel, it's kind of like a security blanket in a way, where it's like, okay, like, I've gotten involved with this company since I was a freshman. And now I'm about to graduate and I've been involved within the past 4 years.
I again, I agree, but I want to be a little bit of a counterpoint or a question. Do some of these early ID programs actually have a chicken and egg problem? Meaning that if I have an early ID program for a big four, am I only going to apply if I already know I want to be an accountant or have a high degree in comfort that I want to be an accountant? And is that big four program going to bring in the undecided major for the early ID? And again, it's not against big four. I'm just using that as an example because I
Mhm.
went to one of those when I was in undergrad.
Mhm. I feel like for some of the programs, from what I've seen, some of them are pretty open-minded, where they're like, all majors are welcome. But then there are some where it's kind of like they already had that agenda, where they're already looking for those specific students. But, and yes, there are students who, like, they come into college and they know exactly what they want to do. But now more than ever, there are students who don't know just yet. Like, they're still trying to figure out, explore, figure out what they like to do, what they don't like to do. So I would encourage employers to have more open mindedness there too. Because for me, before I was a maternal and child health major, I was a nursing major, but now I work in employer branding and marketing. And I'm grateful for the programs that I was in, where they were okay with the fact that my career path wasn't linear. And I've met a lot of people in this industry where it's like, no one kind of like goes into college thinking, okay, I'm going to work in employer branding or marketing. As they navigate their experiences and they're meeting new people, that's going to change their perspective. So I would encourage employers to be more open-minded. Like, don't, like, yes, I understand looking for your target demo of who you want to hire, but you can, your program could be the one that changes that undecided major's mind about what they want to do.
Well, and that's where I was asking the question because again, one of the things I hear from a lot of students is during freshman or sophomore year, first or second, I'm not sure what I want to do, but how do I like are the companies willing to commit to flying me somewhere for an early ID program? And if I go and realize it's not the right fit, um, so thank you for clarifying. One of the other questions we get a lot around when it comes to those first and second year students is what's most important when they're in that exploration phase? Is it the culture of the company? Is it the responsibilities? Is it learning about the industry? What are they really trying to tease out in that first and second year?
Mhm. Definitely mentorship. That is there. I've seen that shift where they're looking for those programs where it's like, we have mentorship. We're going to be able to pair with you, just so they feel that they have someone that's kind of guiding them. But also companies and organizations that align with their personal values. I've noticed with our Gen Z, they're very vocal about, calling out the companies who aren't doing really well, or they're not doing well with, like, corporate responsibility and things within that realm, they're not afraid to call them out. They're not afraid to be like, oh, you shouldn't work here. So I know for Gen Z, as they're navigating where they want to work, they want to make sure like I feel good going into this place. Like this company's actually doing good in the world. And my role, no matter how big or small, is going to contribute to that.
Uh, That's that's good to it's inspiring to hear. It's
Mhm.
inspiring. It's no longer about the company that pays, just they want that right fit. Um, and that's very much again the freshmen and sophomores. When we start talking about juniors and seniors, as you separated them out, how much of what they're trying to do in the process is about exploration versus confirmation? Whether
Mhm.
it's confirmation of the industry or role or confirmation of the company.
Mhm.
Any insights on that?
Good question. I want to say, from what I've seen for juniors and seniors, at this point, some of yes, there are some that still may be undecided, but there's more of an increase of those who they know what they want to do. It's just now about finding the right fit. Because I've seen for some business students, like they may be a part of that big four in their program from a freshman, and sometimes they go all the way and they end up getting a full-time offer and staying, but then some are like, maybe I want to see what else is out there, or they want to niche down. Like they've always loved working in accounting, but now they're like, maybe I want to do accounting at a fashion a company, or just something niche down that kind of like, yes, ties in their personal interests, but also their professional interests too. Like I think a lot with this generation, they're looking for places where it's not a burden to work your 9 to 5 job. Like you can show up and be who you are and do things that excite you, because pay is also still an important aspect too. Like I know there's been that shift in a lot of um students graduating and they're moving to big cities. Like I'm from New York. I went to school in DC, but I also live in Chicago now too. Like I still wanted to be in that city environment, but I also wanted to be in a city that has opportunities for my interests. Like one of the reasons why I didn't stay in DC is because a lot of the opportunities there were very government or political things like that, and that wasn't my interest. So I think now is like really confirming, like going back to this is a company that I feel comfortable being at, and I can see myself, or as well as see others like me in that environment.
Well, and again, that it's a great point. It's seeing myself and seeing others like me. It's interesting with regard to the conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the importance of it being authentic and real versus check the box. Um, but I want to hit something, and again, I know you and I have talked about it in the past. The renege rate. I mean, it continues to be higher, I think, than any of us would like, whether it's renegs or ghosting or any of those things. Um, how much of it do you think is tied to just I happen to have gotten a better offer and it doesn't matter, or how much of it can be mitigated through more or better exploration earlier and building the relationships with the companies earlier?
Mhm. I feel like some reasons I've seen why students may accept an offer and say never mind is, one, yes, they probably are still waiting for that better offer to come. And two, kind of that fear that if they don't say yes, that they won't have an internship, especially because like the job market has been really hard for them. And it's like they probably got to the point where it's like, I went through all of this to finally get to this offer. I need to just take it. Like, even if the next better offer comes through, like I need to feel like, okay, like at least I have an internship too. And I feel like what students are seeing now is a lot of
Yeah.
companies, they are laying folks off very quickly, or they're just like rescinding offers. So they may feel as you know, if these companies aren't giving their employees like the courtesy to know in advance, like I shouldn't have to. But then it also opens up another conversation of where like, you know, students kind of need to be taught the professional way to decline an offer. Like I think, like unless you're in business school, like no one's really talking about this. Like they don't know how to navigate it. So I think having that conversation, and whether it's through those early ID programs, like maybe that can be something you incorporate in the curriculum. Like this is how you should decline an offer, or this is how you should, um, like the professional way to go about it. And it also just, I just feel like too, students are students are very scared. Like, just like, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, they're scared to just not have something. And they're also haven't been taught, like, because what's the terms, like, the right way to let the next, like, the offer that they're waiting on, like letting them know, hey, I got this offer from someone else and I need to give them a deadline. They don't know how yet to have those conversations. And I feel like once they learn, like, it's okay to, the one that you're waiting for, to let them know that you have another offer, because sometimes those companies, if they really want you, they'll speed up the process there.
Yeah.
So once they learn that right way to have those conversations, then it'll be like a domino effect. It will, like, decrease the amount of reneges that's going on.
And I wonder if some of it, you have me thinking, I'm wondering if some of it goes back to this fact that the recruiting process is a little bit screwed up. And folks who have heard me talk about this will be used to hearing this metaphor that a college student shared with me, that we're essentially asking students to get engaged or get married without ever going on a date, that they're getting engaged with their summer internship or their co-op or even some of these early ID programs that are week-long experiences, or get married with that full-time role. And if we can give them more opportunities to go on dates, whether it's with our company or with other companies around, like, is that going to give them more confidence that when they accept that offer, it's actually the right fit? And they won't be sort of jump at the first chance for a company that has a sexier brand name or is paying them an extra $5,000 a year, whatever the number is. If we can give them more of those dating opportunities, can it help overcome that renege issue?
Mhm. I agree. And, like, one of the first things that come to mind are these information sessions for them to meet the people behind the program, and even better, like, meet any past interns or past entry level employees at your program. Like, that gives them more insight into who you are, what you're about. Also, I love when a company has a dedicated early career page on their website. From there, that's when you can incorporate article interviews with your employees, sharing their stories, videos of those information sessions, letting the students know, when they're going to be on your campus, like giving them more information. So when they're deciding, okay, do I want to do this internship or not, they have all these different resources at their disposal so they can do their research. And I think lack of research and lack of access to the resources about your program kind of like leads to students where it's like, I won't know what this internship is like unless I literally know someone who's doing it, or I just accept the offer and I go through it. And that can be, like you said, it can be kind of scary. It's like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into, and there's not enough information on the internet for me to educate myself about that.
And you're bringing up another interesting point, is it has to be real and authentic. Again, engaging with actual hiring managers, with students who may have graduated a year, 2 years, 3 years before, former students who graduated a year, 2 years, 3 years before them, and actually learn both the good and the bad
Mhm.
beyond sort of the pure marketing aspects of early career.
Mhm.
Um, so what are you hearing from the students about what's working and what's not? You talked about info sessions, but what are they telling you about, whether it's, again, more on the info sessions or the career fairs or the job boards? Like, what are they telling you? What do they like? What don't they like? What's actually influencing them?
Mhm. When it comes to what they do, like going back to, being able to connect with past interns and entry level employees, like, it's like, yes, they value the input that the hiring managers and the recruiters may have about the program, but to them, coming from those professionals, it may make them question whether or not it's true. And when they're speaking to those other students who, like you said, are probably like 2 to 3 years away from them in age or in grade, they can really connect with them and they can get like the truth, like the nitty gritty. Like, Gen Z is very, very honest with each other. Like, we'll keep it real with each other. So I encourage, like, whenever, you're going to a campus, like, if you have any of those entry level employees, like, invite them to come with you to be at your booth. Like, or even if there's students at that campus that did internships with your company, be like, hey, would you want to come with us for the career fair? maybe like 1 to 2 hours we'll pay you for your time. And then that might attract their classmates or their peers. And we're like, oh, I know such and such. Oh, I didn't know you worked at that company. Now they're having that conversation. Now they're realizing how awesome it is to work at your program. And
Yeah.
they're getting that realistic, authentic perspective from someone who they go to school with. Because they wouldn't lie. Like usually the interns, like anytime I've spoken with anyone who's done programs that I've done, like I always keep it real. And I also just hold room for, everyone's experience may be different. Like whenever I share my perspectives of being in a program, like I share my perspectives, but then I'm also sharing the perspectives I've heard from my peers. And just like I want to give them everything that they need to know up front, but also encourage them to explore it on their own. Because I mean, I've had the best time at my program, they might. So yeah.
It's about fit. There's no good company culture, bad company culture, or like it's about what is the right company culture, what are the right responsibilities for the individual, and making that match happen.
Mm-hmm.
On the career fairs, I love the advice about again keeping it real, whether it's with former interns who are now still in school there or recent grads. One of the things we hear a lot from students about career fairs to the earlier part of the conversation is the first and second year students. They want to do that exploration. They go to the career fair booth, they have the conversations, they're all excited about the company. And then the company says, great, come back next year when we're recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
Or fill out this form and we'll send you emails over. But are you hearing that at all from the students? And
Yeah.
and is that a lost opportunity for the companies?
I think it is a lost opportunity because it really starts from like the students are interested as a freshman and a sophomore. And I think it's like I would encourage them like as they're getting that feedback to figure out like what are the ways that they can engage with them early. Like maybe you can, if you have like a series of webinars that you do, you can probably dedicate 1 to 2 specifically for freshmen and sophomores. And this could be where you're providing that professional development about application prep and interview prep, and you can still build that pipeline. Like you can still, I've seen so many like from the work that I do at Yellow, like, using it as a pipeline, collecting resumes, collecting information about these students and finding different ways to stay connected with them outside of just emails. Like they want to talk to you, like they really want to like learn about the programs, but like, maybe even finding like projects or opportunities. Like I like when there's I've seen some companies do, what is it called? Like competitions, like coding competitions or hackathons or something specifically for those underclassmen. Like that's also like a great way to keep them engaged, give them insight into your industry. And it'll be beneficial for them too, because they're in your pipeline, but sometimes they can win scholarships, or sometimes they can win an opportunity for an interview for your next hiring cycle. Like fun incentives like this where it's mutually beneficial as well as educational for both parties.
I would obviously agree. I mean, we're seeing a ton. Again, this isn't meant to be about Parker Dewey, but we're seeing a ton of companies using the micro internships for that. Let's use these short-term paid projects as a way to keep those first and yet second year students engaged, but also a way to assess their skills. And there was a great comment in the chat about the transferable skills or core skills like communication, problem solving, attention to detail. These short-term projects are a great way to assess those skills, and the students value it because they're getting real experience and learning about the companies, and again, it's real.
Mhm.
um, when One of the questions we got in the registration was about the time of year. Is
Mhm.
there a certain time of year that students should be thinking about this and employers should be thinking about it? Like, again, we know busy fall recruiting season's about to begin with the career fairs, but is there really a defined time of year?
Mhm. And thinking about, applying for these opportunities or looking for
Yeah.
these opportunities. For students, I definitely will encourage, like, when you're preparing for the fall to kind of start in the summer. So, like, July, August, like, from what I've seen, a lot of those applications for the summer 2025 are hiring around that time. Like, I've seen, there's some now who are hiring for summer 2026. And it's also important for students to understand, like, every company has a different hiring timeline. Like, I've seen companies hiring for summer interns up until like it was like the last week of June. Like it could be really late, but like the competitive programs, like they're hiring now. Like some of their applications are closing like mid-September, late October. So I would encourage those students like to get those companies on their radar and do their research there. Like especially like I know around like September, October, this is when campus fairs are happening. Like I know a lot of companies provide like a list of all, I mean, a lot of schools provide a list of the companies that are attending. Check out that list early in advance, see what opportunities they have. So when you go to the campus fair, you know exactly who you want to talk to, who you want to network with. And it could be even better if you know exactly what program you're interested in. Like you can come to them and show that you've done your research and you're serious about this particular pathway, and the team that are at those booths and stuff, they can help guide you there. And then when it comes to employers, I think keeping the students engaged year round. Like I don't think you should only engage with them during the fall and during the summertime. Like year round, you need to be on their radar. Even like during the summer too. Like I'm thinking, like, yes, you're still you're probably managing your summer interns for that summer, but there's some students who don't have an internship and they still want to be engaged. Like they still want to get on radar for next year so they're not in this same situation again a year from now. So the summer will be a great time to stay engaged with them, and that could be through info sessions and the hackathons and all these different initiatives.
Micro internships are a great way. Again,
Mhm.
I am obviously biased, but yeah, I mean, we're seeing a ton of that. How do you stay engaged? How do you stay top of mind with students, but also recognize that as an employer, talent acquisition professional, you're busy. You're managing your summer intern program, you're going to the career fairs. How do you have this always on pool of talent to bring folks in?
Mhm.
Um, it also brings me to, again, another question that came in beforehand. You hit a lot, and I think you hit a lot of the students what they're telling you they want. Again, you talked about the in-person, authentic learn about. What are the students saying they don't like?
Mhm. Well, they definitely don't like being ghosted. Like that is just a new fear for them, that like they've been applying for all these opportunities and they're either not hearing back or they do hear back and then like the recruiter or whoever reached out to them kind of like drops off the face of the earth. So and that hurts too. Like it hurts them, but then it also hurts your employer brand because now you're going to be known as this company who you're always hiring, but you're not really hiring, or your process is not fair. Students are also, from what I remember too, they're not liking, like I've seen there's different definitions of what an entry level position is. Like I've gotten feedback where some students are seeing ones where like it says that you only need like 0 years of experience, but then some are saying you need 2 to 3 years of experience. Internships are not included. Like I've seen things like that where it's like, so how's this an entry level role? Because it's like if internships aren't included, how what other experience is someone like a new grad supposed to
Yeah.
use? So it's just it gets confusing too because it's like everyone has a different definition of what it means to be entry level, and as an applicant who's applying for roles, you get confused about whether or not you're eligible.
Yeah, I mean that again, crazy to me. That entry level role, 5 years of experience required.
Mhm.
It's great. Anyway, different conversation. And again, any companies that have that in your job description, please, please, please get rid of it. It's incredibly frustrating to students, and my guess is it's probably not actually what you need. And if you need that, don't post it on the college campus. Um, one of the other questions we got is feedback on the process itself, meaning do students feel like the recruiting process is fair? Do they feel like they're able to effectively not just learn about the company, but showcase their skills and get treated fairly?
Mhm. I got a lot of feedback. Students, they really don't like when there's like project assignments or homework in the interview process. It's like they feel to them, it feels like free labor and it's just extra time consuming. Like I think, like I like when an interview application process, like you apply 2 interviews and then that's it. Maybe even three. Like especially for an entry level role, like there's no need for it to be. I really don't think there is a need for it to be so many interviews because it's like who are they speaking with, and it just draws out the process even more. So that's a big feedback. And or even like a lot of students I've heard, they don't like the recorded interviews. Like it feels too robotic. It feels like, it doesn't feel authentic. Like at least with a person, they can connect with them and they can ask questions. Like when they get a recorded interview, like they're like, how do I like it's like kind of like this confusion, like how do you actually pass this? Like, what are you really looking for in these recorded interviews? So, and that's opportunity where they feel like they're not able to really showcase who they are. Like they kind of feel like they have to come in rehearsed and scripted to give the right answer. And then there's like a time limit too of how long the interview can be.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, they're stressful. I remember they are stressful.
Mhm.
Um, Shockingly even more stressful than in-person interviews for all the reasons you said, because you're not getting that give and take. There's not the non-verbals, and you don't get the real-time feedback. One of the other things we're hearing, and interested if you're hearing the same, is what about sort of the filtering tools that are being like, do students feel like the filtering tools and the applicant tracking systems aren't really giving them a fair shake, or AI, or again, we only want kids with over a certain GPA, or the ATS is screening for certain majors or keywords or whatever? Do they feel like that's fair?
I feel like there's a lot of misconception about what an applicant tracking system is like, and there's so much content that's out there where it's like how to create like an ATS friendly resume and things like that. And I feel like there is some nuance to it. Like, and for me working at an HR tech company, I understand like what it means to be ATS friendly, but I think there needs to be more education about what an ATS is. Like, it's not necessarily the system itself that is declining your resume, but it could be how the resume is formatting, or those different like features. It's like where it's like the system can't read it. And for students to understand, like there are still humans that are reading your resumes. Like there are a lot of recruiters and hiring managers are still reading it, and they get like lost in the noise about like how to pass the ATS, and they get so caught up on that and doing all these different things where it's like one of the things I try to encourage my students with your resume, keep it simple. Like no pictures, no diagrams, no too many columns. Just like keep it very simple and very readable, but most importantly, like showcasing that you're good for the role, showcasing your work experience and your accomplishments. Like you can still be creative, you can still be stand out in different ways, whether that's through your LinkedIn or professional portfolio, but your resume, like you need to keep it simple. And then also, like I like when recruiters or hiring managers, especially on LinkedIn, give like real insight into what an ATS is. And I encourage students to like listen to them. Like don't necessarily listen to the creators, especially those who have never worked in recruiting.
Yeah.
Trust the recruiters. Like they're using it every single day. Like trust their input on what an ATS is.
Unless you're applying for a graphics design job, keep your resume very, very, very simple.
Mhm.
It's like an early phase, and again, sorry, I'm a game theory nerd. It's like an early stage of a game where you don't want to be selected out. You're not, no one's gonna pick you because your resume was super pretty or creative or had your picture, but it is a reason you might be selected out for a job.
Mhm.
But I want to stick on this for a second, because one of the things we'll hear from a lot of employers is, because of the ease that they've made it in applying for jobs, which is a good thing. They want to expand access. They're getting inundated with resumes and inundated with applications. And therefore, they're saying, but we need to filter somehow. We need to filter based on GPA, or where someone went to school, or major, or keyword. And they're using all, how do we balance that? How do we balance sort of this access to broad applicant pools with the ability to actually filter or screen them at that first pass effectively?
Mhm. That is a good question.
Uh, And I don't necessarily have again, I wasn't sure if that hit you at all, because again, it's interesting because we'll hear that from employers at the same time. We'll hear from students, I'm not getting a fair shake because my GPA is not high enough. And it seems like those two things are in conflict.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure because like I understand both sides because like there's so much nuance into things like so that The only thing I could think of are those knockout questions, like when they're applying, that kind of like adds that filter, like knocks out the students who aren't meeting the requirements for the particular role. But I
But
think
sometimes,
I would even say GPA, like if I were to remove any filter, I wouldn't include GPA. Like everyone has a story as to what their GPA was, and your GPA is a factor or into who you are as a candidate and what you have to offer. So I think that is like one where it's like it's not really worth it. Like someone with a low GPA can be a really awesome employee for your company.
oh my God. Yeah. I mean, we do a ton of work with student athletes, and we'll hear stories about why their GPA is slightly lower, why they can't participate in the career fair. But meanwhile, when we talk about skills-based hiring, they have all of those core skills employers are looking for. I
Mhm.
mean, beyond the intelligence and communication or teamwork, they also have coachability and leader, like, and they wind up getting filtered out. Sorry to take us off on that. I just wasn't sure because it's always interesting to hear that conflict.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about the students, but you obviously talk a ton with employers as well that are trying to get the most out of their early career programs. What's top of mind for them? What are some of their key priorities or initiatives or challenges?
Mhm. Something I've noticed is there's been this shift in wanting to do more of a hybrid approach for the recruitment tactics. Like they want to still, yes, meet with the students in person on campus, but then also exploring virtual opportunities, which kind of ties in with meeting Gen Z where they're at. And that I understand that too, just because from working in this industry, like recruiters are tired. Like they're traveling all over the US back to back, back to back. Like it's kind of hard to, do that and the recruiting and like depending on the company too. Like at one particular school, like you can have so many students at your booth, and at one school, literally no one comes and visits you. So I encourage employers to continue with that hybrid approach too, because sometimes students like they're not able to visit the campus fair, or they may not be at those schools that you're visiting, but they're still, they can learn a lot from your company too. It's all about exposure too. And the more you're showing up online and creating like remote access for people, it can help spread the word to other folks. And I've also seen this shift in companies and organizations wanting to diversify their early career, like they're going to HBCUs and HSIs and community colleges. Like they're not just sticking to those same like core schools. And I think that's great because there's awesome talent at
Oh
at
my
those
God.
organizations too, at those schools. And they deserve that recognition too. So I like that there's that approach. And I think it's all about, being authentic too. Like you don't want to come off as if you're only caring about the student because of the school that they go to, or whatever the reasons why what makes them like like a minority applicant or things like that. Like be very genuine with your approach, but it's still good to diversify. Because sometimes, honestly, I've seen some programs and I've seen like pictures and it's not diverse at all. And that's concerning for me too, as uh um a Black woman. And even just when I was navigating my early career hunt, like I want to be somewhere where I see myself and I see people like yeah.
No, and that's where again, so many of these initiatives wind up being check the box. And to your point, it goes back to actually engaging with individuals where you feel like they fit in. Again, if you didn't go to an Ivy League, being able to engage with other individuals at the company that weren't Ivy League, or if you're a woman in STEM, being able to engage with other women it's so important to have this feeling of inclusion. We
Mhm.
actually there's a great program we're working on with the Women's Association of Venture and Equity focused on gender equity within financial services. And a lot of these banks and other financial services institutions were engaging their employee resource groups. And
Mhm.
it was about more than we need you to show up at XYZ campus because you're a woman in finance, and more about we want you to actually work with a student on a real project, and here's a perk for you. And it was great because it created that authentic mentoring. Um, One of the things though, I mean, you were talking about trying to go to more schools. We're also hearing from employers that their resources are getting cut, or aren't growing. How are those companies managing that pull between we need to go to more schools and expand beyond just the focus schools with we're being asked to do it with fewer resources? It seems like a paradox almost.
And I feel like it goes back to those virtual, ways to show up on campuses. Like something I'm a big fan of is when companies kind of team up with student orgs and campus clubs to do info sessions, because a lot of these organizations they have this excitement to actually want to connect with an employer and have that connection too. Like for my sorority at Howard, they've done work with actual employers, like, they'll have like that partnerships, and it's kind of like that pipeline too. So I think reaching out to those student orgs, like even like looking at where some of your top early career candidates, what orgs were they in? Like, were they the president? Like, say they were the president of their school's chapter of the American Marketing Association or something like that. Like you can team up with them and do an event, and it will be low cost, and it won't, and especially if it's virtual too, like sometimes they already had the Zoom. It's really just a matter of like your team teaming up, having your presentation, and you're connecting. And now you have this pipeline of students who are most likely going to be in the target demo that you're looking for, in the industry that you're looking for, and you can build those long lasting relationships. Because for some schools, like especially like, when it comes to like the HBCUs, like some of these organizations really move things around on campuses. Like the Greek orgs, like they're kind of like in charge in a way, but like not in a bad way, but like they can help spread the word about your program. So you can develop those relationships with them, and it'll be low cost, but it will also have that mutual um beneficial aspect to it for both parties.
And you're hitting something I hadn't thought about before, where earlier you were talking about the importance of in-person, real, authentic relationship versus virtual. But I think it's that may not necessarily be the right distinction, because what you're describing, you don't necessarily need to be on site or in person, but it still needs to be an authentic, real relationship. And it's great if you can do it and actually shake hands and meet face to face, but there's also the realities of campus recruiting, and you're not always able to do that. And to some extent, you're almost better if you can form a real relationship between a real hiring manager at the or real employee at the company and a real student than even being on site where it's artificial. Does that make sense?
And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about, students are craving those connections, like actual connections with people in their industry that is doing the work that they want to do. And I think just looking at it long term too, like having this connection with that organization, or, at least have this pipeline towards like, okay, my org, we want to do an event about professional development or just interviewing workshop. We have this corporate connection that we can reach out to. They can come up, they can do this presentation, and then they'll gain
Yeah.
applicants for their program. So it's like a cycle. And so I like both aspects. And I feel like in-person connections, I feel like nothing is really replacing that either. Cause
No.
it's like you can really like feed off of each other's energy and like really get to know someone. But then also for like a underclassman who's never had any internships or any like actual like reasons to be connecting with a hiring manager, like they can learn professionalism, like they can know like how to speak to a recruiter, like what are recruiters looking for, like how can I really stand out to them, and they have someone that they can trust as a resource that can feed them that knowledge and help them.
So while in person is obviously the best, it's important to recognize that authentic and real direct connection, whether it's in person or virtual, is better than an artificial connection, even if it is in person.
Like
Sorry,
students
I'm rambling.
want to talk to people. Like they don't want the robots, they don't want the emails. Like they want to be able to like have a conversation with someone and ask questions, and really feel like they're being supported, and that they're not just like the company's not just like checking off a number, like, oh, I've hired this many students from this school. Like they want to feel like they actually care about them and care about their journey.
And this is where, again, this is the part that I still sort of struggle with, is it feels like it should be obvious. It feels like this should be win-win. And meanwhile, we're still seeing processes that aren't focused on building those connections. And it's about a mutual assessment. It's about the company assessing the candidate, not just based upon GPA, but actually try and figure out, is this the right person? Is it the right fit, the right skill set for what we need now? But also ensuring that the candidate can effectively assess the company. Because when you see 55% turnover of recent college grads within the first year, and you look at whatever the effort is put into recruiting them, like there's a disconnect if 55% are leaving.
Mhm.
Anyway, again, I'm rambling here, but it just listening to you, the authenticity is really jumping out. Um, we got some questions in the chat and Q&A I want to make sure we get to. So these are going to be in no particular order. I'm not following a flow, so apologize if they seem disjointed. In the Q&A, one of the questions we got about companies pushing out start dates. What do you advise the students to do?
Mhm. And when you say start dates, like you mean,
They mean that we think you're going to start on June 30th. Oops, we changed our mind. We don't need you until September 1st. Oops, we don't need you until October 1st. Again, it's sort of the flip side of the renege issue.
Mhm. I feel like, having, giving those heads up as early as possible, like especially that student, they have to, relocate to a different city. Like that can mess up their whole plans. Like I've heard from people like they thought their start date was gonna be in September and they made that prep and they've already made that move. And now they're like, oh, actually, we won't need you until January. And now it's like they have like these next few months in this brand new city, no income coming in, and it just like stresses them out to where it's like, I need to find a job. Like, what if they keep pushing it? And like, it's the thing that it makes them even more worried. It makes them even more hesitant about like, did I make the right decision? So, like, letting them know as early as possible, as well as providing any resources that you have that can help them during that time, like to support them to where it's like, okay, like, and to show that you still really want to work with them. Cause that's definitely a fear behind some of the candidates is like, is this kind of like their way of like soft launching that they're actually going to get rid of this role or they're actually not going to move forward with my um position here. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and again, there's no right answer, but it's great to get your perspective for the students out there. Next question was around career fairs. And again, you have some deep expertise in this, both because of the work you've done with ninth semester and your day job. How can companies promote ahead of the career fairs and keep students engaged afterwards? Any best practices?
Mhm. I love when a company has a one-page flyer about their program, or they create like a one pager where it's like, I've seen a few where it's like a one-page flyer about like all the campuses that they're visiting that semester. And, showing up on LinkedIn, showing up like LinkedIn, there's been this misconception that students aren't on LinkedIn. Students are on LinkedIn. Like I even have high schoolers who are like on LinkedIn and they want to find these opportunities. They want to connect with career professionals. So like students love, easily shareable resources. So you can create a one pager about like kind of like a tour, like this is like your campus tour, and then they can share that with students, or like, oh, like this company is going to be at your campus, here's this flyer, here's a date, here's the information, as well as a program flyer, a one pager about what your program is, what's about, what are the roles, what's the pay, fun information, a link to more resources, like something that's easily
Mhm.
shareable so they can share it out with other folks. And then post event, definitely collecting emails. Like I know a lot of at career fairs are collecting emails and setting that follow-up, like maybe this is where you can follow up with more of those. You can follow up those resources that you've been sharing on social so they can continue to share it out. Any information about how to interview or prepare for your applications for that company, because I've seen a rise in a lot of organizations where they have like information from recruiters where like, here's our interview tips, like you can share that in your emails and all that. So emails and showing up on socials, especially LinkedIn, and then job boards too. I've seen a lot with job boards, like you can kind of like send out like a mass message there, or you can send like calendar invites. So it's like, oh, here's a calendar invite for the day that I'm going to be in your campus. Then the student can add that to the calendar. So like different ways for they can be like really in the know about when you're going to be there, what to expect from what they can expect from you, etc.
I'm going to throw in one as well. Smith and Nephew medical device company used a really interesting strategy at NESB either last year or 2 years ago, where before NESB, they highlighted to students, if you come by our booth, we're going to have a series of micro internships that we're going to make available to individuals that come by our booth. And students were literally coming by the booth because they were intrigued by whether it was a rotational business development program or something in the lab designing medical devices or a marketing role or whatever. They were coming by, not just submitting the resume, but applying for the micro internship. And it was this great carrot to get the students to the booth, but they were also using it to keep the students warm afterwards.
I
Um,
love that. I love that idea of just kind of like, so like they applied for the program like at the booth.
they literally, the micro internship was set so the student sort of scanned the QR code, went through, answered the quick question, and it was exclusively available. And they, again, they promoted it before NESB to try to get through the noise. So
Mhm.
instead of offering a t-shirt at the career fair or squish ball or whatever, and Smith Nephew, it's not as well known as Google, even though it's a global medical device company, they were still talking about just the line of students at the booth, and it was just night and day versus other efforts because they
Mhm.
were giving students what they want, which is
Yeah,
a
and
real experience, a real way to learn about the company.
that also has me thinking of kind of like those like kind of like limited edition things that you can offer at your booth. Like maybe the first 20 students can get a resume review. And like the way I'm thinking, like, those 20 students come, maybe 2 to 3 of those students, they brought their resume, they're actually qualified for one of your programs. And then from there, it's like, oh, let me mark this down. And kind of like it's beneficial because they can get some feedback about their resume. But then also, like, you can literally find
Oh my
people
God.
at this career fair and now they have an interview and it's like, oh, actually, we're gonna make some hires from this.
You're hitting like my biggest, and again, sorry, I'm going to digress for a second. You're hitting like my biggest soapbox issue is, I don't know, once every couple months, I'll see some chatter about what's the best swag to give away at the career fair. Is it a squish ball? Is it a mug? Is it a t-shirt? Is it a pen or a notebook? And part of my thought is if you give students what they actually want, you don't have to like bribe them with a squish ball or a t-shirt. Give them
Mhm.
what they actually want. They actually want a resume review. They
Yeah.
actually want a real experience with your company. They actually want to engage with a hire. And if you give them that, they're going to flock to it. It shouldn't be that hard. But
Like they
anyway,
have t-shirts and water bottles. Like they want someone to tell them, like, how's my resume? What can I be doing? What are some actual like advice that like when I leave your booth, I can apply into my early career?
I 100% agree. Couple other questions we got. I want to make sure I get to, as opposed to me ranting and raving about career fair swag. Um, Cover letters. Are companies like, what's your advice to students on cover letters? Are companies still using them?
Mhm. I think since there's been such an influx of applications coming in for programs that they're already having employees are already having a hard time reading all these resumes, and I don't believe that they're reading a cover letter. But I've also heard some people where it's like I would never say to not send a cover letter, like especially if it's like maybe in your cover letter you want to explain, go deeper into something that's on your resume or something that's missing from your resume. Like it could help because I've heard some people are like, my cover letter, like the recruiter was like, yeah, the hiring manager was like, yeah, your cover letter is actually what stood out to me. Like I haven't seen one in a while. It's very detailed. So it could be helpful, but I wouldn't spend too much time writing them just because I don't think many people are reading them, but it could be that one thing that
Yeah.
makes your application stand out.
The advice I would jump in on with this is I agree with you. With more and more students sending resumes in over email, obviously, versus mailing them, make sure that whatever is in your email, you're treating like a cover letter. Don't
Mhm.
start an email with, "Hey Jade, how's it going?" Don't like use proper grammar, spell check, make sure everything. And if there's a certain point you want to get across, to really convince Jade, the talent acquisition professional or the hiring manager, to read it, sort of that email letter that you're attaching your resume to is probably a pretty good place to do it. We're
Mhm.
running out of time. We had another question I want to get to. Insights, or any student reactions, or are you hearing student feedback on the assessments? And they listed some, whether it's predictive index or Myers-Briggs or any of the personality assessments out there.
Mhm. I haven't heard much feedback actually about those specific assessments, but I
Okay.
know it just like it goes on, one of those things that like expands the application process and interview process longer than it needs to be, because sometimes they have to do the assessment and then they have to do the recorded interview, then they have an actual interview, and then now they have an assignment to do. It just draws it out. But
Okay.
yeah.
I just wasn't sure. Again, the question came.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's it. Again, we're hitting the top of the hour. Any last minute sort of advice for anyone in the audience here?
Mhm. When it comes to employers, definitely, I would say definitely give students some grace, especially the underclassmen, just because like they're still trying to navigate and figure things out and learn about professionalism. When you can like give them those resources, give them that help there. Like I've heard a lot of feedback from employers that sometimes like students come into interviews and they're just not prepared, like they don't know how
Yep.
to interview. And it can go two ways. It could be like they literally didn't do any research, or
Mhm.
it's like this is their first interview ever. They're super nervous. They don't know what they're doing. Like giving them some grace there. But then it's also like, when you can educating them. Like I like when I hear that some people before an interview they send over, an idea of like what the questions may be that they're gonna ask, or any resources from the company to help them with their interviews. Like that helps the students feel more prepared and more, confident as they're going in, because it's like, wow, like you actually really want me to do well. Like you've given me all these resources.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, for students, I would encourage you to do your research too, because it's like no matter what, whether it's like preparing for the interview or research to see like whether or not you want to work at this company, like there's information out there that's at your disposal. It may not be a lot, but if you can lean on that, that can help you too. And then most importantly, my biggest advice for students is to diversify your applications. Like everyone gets so caught up in wanting to work at the FANGs and the big companies, but smaller and mid-sized companies have such great programs, and they can give you that um those resources and the professional development that you're looking for, and understanding that like a lot of people who work at those big companies, that's not always their first role. Like sometimes they're working at a smaller company and they make their way up there, and it's a journey. Like that's my biggest thing. Like for me, like I've worked on both sides. Like I've worked with large organizations and then I've worked with smaller companies, and I'm at a point in my early career post grad was like I enjoy working at a smaller company because I'm getting that mentorship, that one-on-one professional advice. Like I don't feel like such a small fish in a big sea. Like I remember when I
Yeah.
first did my role at Yellow, like I was very clear with my manager at the time, like what I was looking for in my career, what I want. And very quickly she helped me with that. Like I have grown so much professionally within my role that I don't think I would have been able to have at a big company, just because at a larger company, there's so many things moving. Like in my first role at TikTok, like it's a great organization, awesome work, but there's so many things that are moving all the time that it's like it's kind of hard to get that, one-on-one mentorship that you're looking for as a new grad. Like now in your early career, now more than ever is the best time to get that. And eventually, you can make your way up to those larger companies, but it doesn't change who you are as a person if you're at a smaller or mid-sized company. You can actually make a lot of impact at that company, that you can bring that knowledge and that expertise into the larger company. So it's all about, I'm like big on like playing the long game. Like you don't have to rush to get to where you want to be. Just take it step by step and you can learn in every step that you go.
Well, that's really key. It's about figuring out that right fit. And again, for the employers on here, it's about making sure students can make educated decisions about if your organization's the right fit, and you can make those decisions as well. And for the students and universities, it's empowering the students to best understand what is the right fit and empowering them to present their best foot forward and sort of increase the odds of them landing in the right role. Jade, I could talk to you for hours, but I can talk. Um, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us. For everyone joining, thank you again for joining us as well. We'll be sharing the recording and the summary afterwards. And again, Jade, enjoy this steamy day in Chicago. And again, thank you so much. The work you're doing on behalf of the students and employers out there, both with Yellow and with ninth semesters, absolutely incredible. I'm a huge fan. As I said, I was a fanboy before I had the opportunity to meet you in person. I'm just so honored you spent an hour with us today. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And I hope this was helpful for everyone. I love talking about all things early career. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, Jade Walters. I'll share more insights and resources, and feel free to pick my brain. Thank you for
She is
having
a
me.
true thought leader in this space. So, yeah, she is the GOAT to whoever said that. I would agree. She is incredible. Have a
Thank-
great rest of the Tuesday. Luck.
Yes, same to you.
Bye
All
bye.
right, bye.